Supergirl is the sophomore cinematic effort from the DCU, the first project without James Gunn at the helm in either the direction or the writing. This movie follows Kara Zor-El, also known as Supergirl, as her path intertwines with the vengeance-seeking Ruthie. Alright, unfortunately, I'm back to complaining again. I didn't intend on approaching this movie through this lens, but it is rather difficult to discuss Supergirl without comparing it to Guardians of the Galaxy. What I wanted to do was talk about Supergirl as a Craig Gillespie movie. The flawed central female character and the pop-rock needle drops are a part of what Gillespie's style has evolved into over the span of his career. So I intended on giving this movie the benefit of the doubt, and thinking that similarities to the aforementioned movies would be a matter of Gillespie's own style, paired with a space opera narrative, only moderately loosely mimicking those movies. That would be incorrect. This is, aesthetically and thematically, a reheated version of better movies I have no doubt that you've seen before, only tasting much worse because the ingredients are not handled sufficiently. One of these is the approach to theme. Supergirl has one significant thematic interest: vengeance. Vengeance is nothing new as a theme, not even in the superhero genre, but the way with which this movie uses vengeance feels highly constructed and cheap. Kara hunts Krem down for poisoning Krypto, her dog. The use of an injured animal and the telegraphing present in the countdown to its inevitably avoided death feels infantilizing. When Guardians of the Galaxy did the same establishing of narrative hook, the injury led to a deeper understanding of the injured character via flashbacks, and the character's importance in the lives of his friends had been built up so that death had significant meaning for the rest of the cast. Death had meaning. Supergirl instead positions the audience to never expect death to mean anything. It's only a hypothetical. They were never going to kill Krypto. But this could be remedied if Ruthie's arc can make up for the lack of intrigue on Kara's behalf. It doesn't. The audience's introduction to Ruthie is incredibly short. Her equilibrium is established, and in a matter of what feels like only seconds, Krem appears, without a second thought starts to slaughter her family. Not only is her family so poorly written that they basically set themselves up for slaughter after a fairly competent first half in their encounter with Krem, Ruthie's brother attempts to jump scare her for the fun of it, and this abrupt motion is what gets him killed, unceremoniously. But the pace of the scene just feels off. If the rest of the film weren't so plagued with script issues, I would have suggested that this was a poor studio mandate, cutting so as to trim the runtime for an audience with shortened attention spans. The scene moves by so fast that I succumb to a sort of narrative whiplash. This movie does not breathe when it needs to, so from one scene in the build-up to the final fight, and the final scene. Supergirl also happens to have what I consider to be the laziest method of approaching the theme. The characters, in dialogue, simply state the theme. Vengeance is bad. They do attempt to complicate this in an interesting direction, but it's too little too late. The most obvious approach to this particular theme is taken in the most cookie-cutter manner. Supergirl also wants to have its cake and eat it too. This is a movie which seems to believe that it has a dynamic of co-protagonists. Fight scenes will be framed from Kara's perspective, and then in Ruthie's perspective. The only issue is that Ruthie is not developed enough to carry the movie's narrative perspective. Both Kara and Ruthie's arcs are weak, but Kara has more room to grow. A fair chunk of the action is only pushed into the background as the camera focuses on Ruthie. Kara's impossible to perceive superspeed distances the audience from her when Ruthie becomes the primary subject of the narrative. What is now concerning for the future of the DCU is the fact that the writer for this, first-time feature screenwriter Anna Nogueira, is a prevalent creative in this cinematic universe, second only to James Gunn himself. This movie, with its shoddy pacing and clunky delivering of the theme, is poorly scripted, so having her have the keys to the Teen Titans and Wonder Woman is a bit of a worry. I want the DCU to be good and interesting, taking a variety of characters and genres, worked on by a broad variety of filmmakers, like it was presented as when it was initially unveiled. Hopefully Nogueira improves over time, and this is delegated to only a necessary stepping stone. One can hope. Going back to the action sequences, I think they're framed poorly. They've got numerous cuts per scene, making the action illegible. It's hard to keep track of what's going on as things are moving past incredibly quickly. You also don't really get a great deal of superpowered action. Kara is depowered a great deal. For a couple of scenes, seeing her weakened increases the stakes of the fight she's in, but being depowered for large chunks of runtime makes the rhythm of fight sequences repetitive, lacking stakes. But I do think that Millie Alcock is able to elevate the material that she's been provided. Her performance is able to balance the badass bravado with the internal injury caused by her isolation from all that she once held dear. She would otherwise be captivating to watch if it weren't for the significant flaws of the story being told. Oh, and the antagonist. I nearly forgot. Krem is an unbelievably boring and nothing character. He's a collage of all cliché crazy villain archetypes from recent films stuffed into a horrendously over-designed costume. He has basic superpowers which don't look visually interesting. The visual imagery is its own separate issues. But Krem is nothing. He isn't intimidating, because his goofy demeanour almost immediately detracts from the cartoonishly villainous actions he does. There is zero nuance into why he does what he does. He just does the most generic, emotionally hollow villainous acts an antagonist can perform for no real reason. It's not enigmatic. It's just bland. Comic book superheroes should be more well suited for film, as they're both visual mediums capable of beautiful visual imagery. Yet, Supergirl, aside from Men in Black levels of fun and grimy extraterrestrial designs, is visually uninteresting. The brown colour grade is muddy, a catalyst for the glazing over of my eyes. This movie attempts bigger, comic book splash page-like shots, but they don't have the emotional gravitas offered by an investment in the characters. Combining the visual slog and the attempt at quote-unquote cool shots, frequently in slow-mo, is less than derivative. So in the end, Supergirl is even worse than the mediocre Marvel movies of the 2010s, by being even less interestingly made, more derivative of their tropes and conventions, than doing anything to stand apart. To be fair, it is better than the recent blockbuster wannabes that made up the vast majority of Marvel's 2020s output. I don't want to just be hated because of my dislike for this film. If you enjoyed this, cool. But I really couldn't. Supergirl, 1.5 stars. And now it's time for spoilers. This isn't a substitute for watching the film, so I suggest watching it first, before continuing. There are two characters who steal the movie whenever they're on screen, for differing reasons. The first of these that I'd like to discuss is Superman. David Cornsweet, without overly hyperbolizing, is Superman, so even having him appear in small doses across this film was a clear highlight. His talking to Kara when she lands on Earth for the first time, and him in the film's final scene with this golden boy act, is still really charming for me. The film's best scenes are when Kara's nihilism, maybe, and Clark's optimism clash in their dialogue scenes. It's been said that was the only major part of the film where James Gunn was especially protective, keeping the image of Superman distinctly cohesive between projects. It's clear the writing with his character is much better than the rest of the cast. Even when he's also sort of exposing his beliefs surrounding the theme of what home means, Cornsweet's performance, and the way in which Clark's natural kindness are written, make some of the more blatantly underwritten lines of dialogue work. It sucks to say that the best part of a Supergirl movie is the involvement of Superman, and I wish that wasn't the case, but that's where we are with this movie. On the other hand, there's Lobo. I don't think that Lobo should have been in this movie. Next to Superman, I think that Lobo is the best characterized character in this film. Jason Momoa's performance is aptly pushing the overly edgy pastiche of 90s comic book characters to excellent extents. The movie is put into another gear when he's on screen, the music shifts, and it becomes the Lobo show. That being said, he's forced into the narrative. Yes, he's given a little to do to differentiate fight scenes, but I feel like he's there only to be a recognizable face in the crowd. His introduction's a really clunky exposition dump from Alcock's Kara, recapping his backstory, but then he doesn't do much but quip, throwing one-liners. He takes away from the focus which should, by all means, be Ruthie and Kara's developing relationship. Remove Lobo and spend more time on the main characters, and this may have been a better movie. Krem is dispatched in the end in a way which, theoretically, should be interesting. It's more emotionally complicated than anything which came before, but that's not exactly high praise. Ruthie has to learn the lesson that vengeance is not good actually, which unless this is someone's first revenge movie, is kind of obvious, as it's the main conclusion for a great deal many films of that subgenre. It's generic. But then Kara does, in fact, use Ruthie's sword to kill Krem. It marks Kara as being more prone to violence than Clark, sort of backtracking her arguments to Ruthie. It doesn't extend much further than that, but given the monotony of the rest of the narrative, this was at least a little something. It doesn't leave a lasting impact. However, what I'd like to argue is that maybe the killing of Krem should have been a more triumphant thing. I mean, he steals girls so that he can forcibly marry them to his crew and others. The sexual abuse tied to this character, and the framing of revenge stories from women's perspectives in more recent films, should make him the type of character whose execution is a net positive and not some ethical dilemma. Killer, dog torturer, highly connoted rapist. This is an unredeemable person. I guess this is just exposing my beliefs surrounding the matter, but I think the movie itself made Crumb a character whose death would have been a bigger deal. Does that make sense? I get that the no killing is to show who the bigger individual is, but considering Supergirl does go there, I expected the framing to be pretty different. Well, that's all. Keep on watching movies, and form your own opinions. See you in the next one.